Ascent Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Leadership Presence by Harvard Business Review. Narrated by Jonathan Yen and Chloe Cannon. 1. Deconstructing Executive Presence by John Beeson. If you ask a group of managers who aspire to the C-suite what it takes to get there, they'll invariably mention executive presence, but they aren't always so clear about what it means. Not too long ago, I conducted a series of off-the-record interviews with senior executives responsible for executive placement in their organizations. I asked them about the make-or-break factors they consider in making C-suite promotion decisions. Executive presence was one of the handful of decision criteria they cited, but even these experienced executives struggled to define what it is and why one person has it and another doesn't. In an increasingly diverse world, where senior executives are no longer all 6'2" males who look like they were sent from central casting, what does it take to create a commanding executive presence? The right clothes? A firm handshake? Those matter, but they don't tell the whole story. Although executive presence is highly intuitive and difficult to pin down, it ultimately boils down to your ability to project mature self-confidence, a sense that you can take control of difficult, unpredictable situations, make tough decisions in a timely way, and hold your own with other talented and strong-willed members of the executive team. If that's the nub of the issue, what style, what behaviors combine to signal that level of self-confidence to others? For some answers, consider 3 talented managers, 2 of whom didn't make it to the executive level, and 1 who did. Every manager would love to have a Frank Simmons on his or her management team. Experienced, results-oriented, collaborative, and committed to the company, Frank showed up on succession lists for a number of years, but was never promoted. Although a top performer in his area, Frank always looked a little rumpled, and his posture was a bit hunched. When he made presentations to the executive team, he was invariably well prepared, but his lack of comfort was evident in his body language. Normally highly articulate, his presentations were long-winded and rambling. In the Q&A portion of his presentations, he tended to be overly deferential to members of the executive team, and he was hesitant to insert himself into the conversation when the executives got into a debate. As one senior executive said privately, "Frank's an incredible asset to the company, but I just can't envision putting him in front of a customer." Alicia Wallace was a highly trained marketing manager who had succeeded in every assignment she'd had. However, when it came time to select high-potential people for promotion to more senior levels, she always missed the cut. As much as the senior marketing executives liked and respected her, they were never quite comfortable moving her to the next level. The reason? Her apparent disorganization. People would talk about Alicia being Alicia when she arrived late to yet another meeting, rushed, harried, and with her files askew. Was this trivial and petty? Perhaps, but on a visceral level it caused senior people to question her ability to manage a larger staff and maintain the necessary focus on implementing key priorities. If you entered a room filled with 20 managers, Lydia Taylor, a member of the legal department, wouldn't stand out, but that would change once the dialogue started. Although soft-spoken and not terribly aggressive, she was highly respected by her peers as well as the executives with whom she worked. Lydia possessed outstanding listening skills and had an unerring sense of when to enter the conversation to make her point. Unrushed, straightforward, and unflappable, she maintained her calm, even demeanor when others got emotional, and she used her dry sense of humor to diffuse difficult situations. When challenged by others, she stood her ground in a firm, non-confrontational way. Although highly supportive of her internal customers, she was prepared to put her foot down if anyone advocated a position that might put the company at risk. As a result, Lydia was identified as a top candidate and groomed to succeed the company's general counsel. The age-old question is whether executive presence can be developed. The answer is yes, if you have a baseline of self-confidence and a willingness to deal with the unpredictable situations that go with the territory at the executive level. Start by addressing the basics. Find a couple of trusted people who will give you unvarnished feedback about your dress and grooming and the level of self-confidence you project. As noted, dress and grooming aren't the whole deal, but major problems can create an impediment. One highly talented female manager was privately described by her peers as dressing like a school marm, while others said a hard-charging manager came off like a used car salesman. The connotations aren't flattering, nor are they insignificant. People tend not to trust a used car salesman, and school marms aren't typically thought of as creative and risk-taking, two qualities central to leading innovation and change at the executive level. Look for opportunities to hone your presentation skills. Not only is public speaking an important executive requirement, but your ability to stand and deliver to an executive group or large audience is frequently viewed as an indicator of your ability to handle pressure. Rehearse a major presentation until you can come off as relaxed and in command, and pay special attention to the Q&A portion, since your poise when questioned and ability to think on your feet help you project a sense of self-confidence. Most important, find your voice as an executive. That is, identify your assets and leverage them to the hilt. Some people are naturally gregarious and can fill a room with their personality. Others, like Lydia Taylor, rely on their listening ability, sense of timing, and ability to maintain their composure when others get emotional. In an increasingly diverse world, executive presence will look very different from one executive to another. However, the constant is building the confidence of others that you can step up as a leader when times get tough.
2. How New Managers Can Send the Right Leadership Signals by Amy Jen Sue. One of the most exciting and sometimes anxiety-producing transitions in a career comes when you move from being an individual contributor to becoming a manager. At this juncture, what you think, what you say, and how you show up, in effect, your leadership presence, can have a direct impact on those you are now leading and managing for the first time. So, as a new manager, how do you build an authentic and connected leadership presence that has a positive impact on your team and colleagues? Set a leadership values-based goal. An authentic and connected presence begins from the inside out. How you define the role and what you value will telegraph out to those you work with. As a new manager, spend time to consider the kind of leader you are and hope to be. Set an aspirational goal to serve as a guiding compass. As one new manager shared recently, my professional leadership goal is to be a genuine and emotionally intelligent manager who inspires others to excellence. As Ram Charan, Stephen Drotter, and James Knoll describe in their book, The Leadership Pipeline, though this might seem like an easy, natural leadership passage, it's often one where people trip. They make the job transition from individual contribution to manager without making a behavioral or values-based transition. They must believe that making time for others, planning, and coaching are necessary tasks and their responsibility. More than that, they must view this other-directed work as mission-critical to their success. increase your emotional intelligence and situational awareness. As the job now shifts to getting more work done through others, recognize that what motivates or influences you may not be how others are motivated or influenced. In advance of important interactions or meetings, ask yourself, who is the other person or audience? What might their perspective on this topic be? How are they best motivated or influenced? What does the situation at hand call for? What are the optimal outcomes and tone? These questions remind us that leadership presence is not about finding a one-size-fits-all solution. Leadership presence is therefore an and/both versus an either/or. On the one hand, having an effective leadership presence includes being authentic, genuine, and clear on your guiding compass, core values, and convictions. And on the other hand, it includes being adaptive and agile, demonstrating an ability to connect with different kinds of people through many different communication platforms and technologies. Be clear and direct, always with respect. As your new role will likely increase your interactions with people of many different styles, having an effective leadership presence includes continually building and practicing the skills of being clear and direct, while finding ways of making connections and showing respect. Leadership presence is dynamic and fluid, and encourages a two-way dialogue where we can give authentic voice to our views while staying open to the views and perspectives of others as we work toward a common goal, best outcome, or solution. Here are a few examples of things that can help you cultivate your own voice and listen to the voices of others. Know what you think. If you are naturally strong at listening and hearing others' opinions, flex your muscles in getting to your own convictions and thoughts more quickly. Before important meetings or interactions, jot down a few bullet points to yourself. What are the 3 to 5 things I believe about this topic or issue? Ask, listen, and acknowledge. Conversely, if you are naturally strong at having your own opinions, settle into a greater patience so that you can make space to hear others. Show you are really listening by asking great questions, clarifying what you've heard, or acknowledging how you're processing the information. In some cases, you might share, "With this new information, I am experiencing this quite differently. My view has changed." In other cases, you might end up saying, "In digesting what you have shared, I am finding I just can't get myself comfortable with that direction. Ultimately, this is coming down to a difference of opinion." Share the why. As a new manager, it's also critical to share the why behind your vision, priorities, expectations, feedback, or requests. Don't dilute your message. Instead, make it more powerful by sharing more about the context. Help connect work deliverables or professional development to what's happening at the organizational level. For example, in giving developmental feedback to someone, you could include additional context, such as, because the organization is growing so fast, there is opportunity for each member of the team to stretch and step up in the following ways. I'd love to see you take on... Or you can strengthen the message by painting the picture of the aspiration. I'd love to see us become best in class at this, and here's what will be required. Bring a stable and grounded presence in the face of change, stress, or difficult news. The reality is that most of us can exude an effective presence, especially when business is going well or when we are having a good day. As a new manager, however, it's equally important to ask yourself, what do people experience when I'm stressed out, tired, under deadline, or when someone is bringing me bad news? Recognize that what may feel like a passing or fleeting moment of anger, impatience, or hurried insincerity may end up negatively impacting your team and its overall morale and engagement. As author Daniel Goleman writes in his book, Primal Leadership, quite simply, in any human group, the leader has maximal power to sway everyone's emotions. How well leaders manage their moods affects everyone else's moods, which becomes not just a private matter, but a factor in how well a business will do. Maintaining a stable and grounded presence increases the likelihood that your team will feel comfortable bringing you important information, even if it's bad news, so that you can help to remove obstacles, reset priorities, or get the team back on track. Professor Amy Edmondson's research finds that teams can optimize their learning and performance when there is an environment or culture, most often set by the manager, that promotes both psychological safety and accountability. To help maintain and sustain a more stable and grounded presence, be sure that you are setting the right priorities for yourself and that you have strategies for managing the workload of being a leader as you take on this larger role and responsibility as a new manager. Becoming a new manager is an important leadership passage in your career. Step back and think about your leadership presence. And if you are thinking, saying, and showing up as you most hope to and intend, set a values-based leadership goal. Increase your emotional intelligence and situational awareness. Be direct with respect, and find strategies to maintain and sustain a stable and grounded presence. It's easy in our humbleness to underestimate the impact we have on others' lives as managers. As Professor Clayton Christensen writes in his classic HBR article, "How Will You Measure Your Life?" In my mind's eye, I saw one of my managers leave for work one morning with a relatively strong level of self-esteem. Then I pictured her driving home to her family 10 hours later, feeling unappreciated, frustrated, underutilized, and demeaned. I imagined how profoundly her lowered self-esteem affected the way she interacted with her children. The vision in my mind then fast-forwarded to another day, when she drove home with greater self-esteem, feeling that she had learned a lot, had been recognized for achieving valuable things, and had played a significant role in the success of some important initiatives. I then imagined how positively that affected her as a spouse and a parent. My conclusion: management is the most noble of professions if it's practiced well. No other occupation offers as many ways to help others learn and grow, take responsibility, be recognized for achievement, and contribute to the success of a team. 3. To sound like a leader, think about what you say and how and when you say it. By Rebecca Shambaugh. Nancy started her day feeling prepared to brief her executive team on a high-stakes project she had been working on for the past 2 months. She had rehearsed her slide deck repeatedly to the point where she had every level of content practically memorized. She arrived at the meeting early and waited patiently yet anxiously for her part of the agenda. The meeting began, and within a few minutes, Jack, one of the co-chairs, asked her to brief the executives on her project and recommendations. Nancy enthusiastically launched into her presentation, hitting every talking point that she had meticulously rehearsed. With a solid command of the material, she felt at the top of her game, and was relieved that she'd spent so much time practicing and preparing for this meeting. But just as she was about to move into her recommendations, Jack interrupted and said, "Nancy, I appreciate your hard work on this project, but it is not relevant to our agenda, and it doesn't have merit for the business objectives we're covering today." Mortified, Nancy retreated to her chair and sat in silence for the rest of the meeting. She couldn't wait to bolt from the room the moment the meeting ended to reflect on how this moment, which she expected would be a positive turning point in her career, had turned into a disaster. What just happened here? While Nancy was prepared to participate in the meeting, she had failed to think strategically. This common problem trips up many capable managers, executives, and leaders when determining their role in communications, meetings, and other forums. Learning how to develop and convey a more strategic executive voice, in part by understanding context, can help leaders avoid finding themselves, as Nancy did, in a potentially career-damaging situation. Whether you are an associate manager or a senior executive, what you say, how you say it, when you say it, to whom you say it, and whether you say it in the proper context are critical components for tapping into your full strategic leadership potential. If you want to establish credibility and influence people, particularly when interacting with other executives or senior leadership, it's important to be concise and let individuals know clearly what role you want them to play in the conversation. It's also important to demystify the content of any message you deliver by avoiding jargon and being a person of few, but effective, words. All of these factors relate to developing a strategic executive voice. Your executive voice is less about your performance. It relates more to your strategic instincts, understanding of context, and awareness of the signals you send in your daily interactions and communications. Like its sister attribute, executive presence, executive voice, can seem somewhat intangible, and thus difficult to define. But the fact is, we all have a preferred way to communicate with others, and doing this with strategic intent and a solid grasp of context can mean the difference between success and failure in your communication and leadership style. One of the most important aspects of having an executive voice relates to being a strategic leader. I frequently hear from top executives that they would like to promote one of their high-potential leaders, but feel the person is not strategic enough to advance. When I hear managers say this, I try to gently push back and suggest that maybe the problem isn't the candidate's lack of strategic leadership potential. Perhaps they are failing to tap into their abilities as a strategic leader. Whether you have someone on your team who you think lacks strategic readiness, or you're worried that you might be a leader with untapped strategic potential due to an undeveloped executive voice, keep listening. Next are some coaching strategies that I use frequently with both male and female executives to help them add a more strategic executive voice to their leadership toolkit. Understand the context. How often do you find yourself throwing out an unformed idea in a meeting, not speaking up when people are looking for your ideas, or saying something that doesn't quite fit the agenda and suddenly getting that deer in the headlights feeling? If these situations sound familiar, what is it that went wrong? In short, these types of tactical errors come down to failing to understand the context of the call, meeting, or discussion that you are in. For example, if you are the primary authority on a topic, then it's likely that the context would require you to lead the meeting and make any final decisions. But if you are one of several executives who might have input, then sharing your view and connecting the dots with others, rather than stealing the spotlight with your great ideas, would be your role. If you are in learning mode and are not asked to present at a meeting, then your role when it comes to communication would be to observe and listen. Knowing or finding out in advance what your expected role is in a group forum or event can guide you in determining the kind of voice you need for that particular venue, and can help ensure that you understand the context before you speak up. Be a visionary. Sometimes we fail to tap into an executive voice because we focus too much on our own function or role. Strategic leaders are more visionary than that, taking an enterprise view that focuses less on themselves and more on the wider organization. Another part of being visionary is developing the ability to articulate aspirations for the future and a rationale for transformation. This type of executive vision helps guide decisions around individual and corporate action. You should work toward connecting the dots with your recommendations to show how your decisions affect others around the table, including your staff and the organization as a whole. Cultivate strategic relationships. One of the best ways to build your strategic thinking is by leveraging relationships more intentionally, with specific business goals in mind. This calls for having senior leaders and executives who bring a strategic perspective of the organization's goals, changes, and top priorities that we may normally not have access to. When you cultivate and invest in broad strategic relationships, it helps you avoid getting caught up in day-to-day minutiae. It's easy to lose sight of the significance of cultivating new and diverse relationships when you already have a full plate. But part of being able to access a strong executive voice is expanding your knowledge beyond your specific position, department, or area of expertise. To develop your executive voice, take time to reach out to at least one person each week outside of your immediate team or functional area. Try to learn how they fit into the business as a whole, their goals and challenges, ways you might support them as a strategic business partner. Bring solutions, not just problems. While coaching a wide range of executives, I've seen firsthand that most feel frustrated when people point out challenges but don't offer any resolutions. Leading strategically with a strong executive voice involves problem solving, not just finger-pointing at difficult issues. You can show up more strategically by doing your homework and taking the lead in analyzing situations. Brainstorm fresh ideas that go beyond the obvious. Even if you don't have the perfect answer, you can demonstrate your ability to come up with clever solutions. Stay calm in the pressure cooker. People with an effective executive voice aren't easily rattled. Can you provide level-headed leadership even when, in fact, particularly when, everyone around you is losing their composure? When you can stick with facts instead of getting swept into an emotional tailspin no matter how stressed you feel, you'll be able to lead with a more powerful executive voice. It can be uncomfortable to recognize and admit personal challenges regarding your executive voice, and at first you may get pushback when making suggestions to improve the executive voice of those on your team. But once you overcome this initial resistance, whether in yourself or others, you'll find it's worth the upfront effort to investigate how to contribute most effectively to important meetings and other communications. By making the necessary adjustments to your approach to participation, you can avoid flying blind and start showing up more strategically in every setting. 4. Connect, then Lead, by Amy J.C. Cuddy, Matthew Kohut, and John Neffinger. Is it better to be loved or feared? Niccolo Machiavelli pondered that timeless conundrum 500 years ago and hedged his bets. It may be answered that one should wish to be both, he acknowledged. But because it is difficult to unite them in one person, it is much safer to be feared than loved. Now, behavioral science is weighing in with research showing that Machiavelli had it partly right. When we judge others, especially our leaders, we look first at two characteristics: how lovable they are, their warmth, communion, or trustworthiness, and how fearsome they are, their strength, agency, or competence. Although there is some disagreement about the proper labels for the traits, researchers agree that they are the two primary dimensions of social judgment. Why are these traits so important? Because they answer two critical questions. What are this person's intentions toward me? And is he or she capable of acting on those intentions? Together, these assessments underlie our emotional and behavioral reactions to other people, groups, and even brands and companies. Research by one of us, Amy Cuddy, and colleagues Susan Fisk of Princeton and Peter Glick of Lawrence University shows that people judged to be competent but lacking in warmth often elicit envy in others, an emotion involving both respect and resentment that cuts both ways. When we respect someone, we want to cooperate or affiliate ourselves with him or her, but resentment can make that person vulnerable to harsh reprisal. Think of disgraced Tyco CEO Dennis Kozlowski, whose extravagance made him an unsympathetic public figure. On the other hand, people judged as warm but incompetent tend to elicit pity, which also involves a mix of emotions. Compassion moves us to help those we pity, but our lack of respect leads us ultimately to neglect them. Think of workers who become marginalized as they near retirement, or of an employee with outmoded skills in a rapidly evolving industry. To be sure, we notice plenty of other traits in people, but they're nowhere near as influential as warmth and strength. Indeed, insights from the field of psychology show that these two dimensions account for more than 90% of the...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?